Hello, everyone. Welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday and Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure. All Bookmap limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk exposure. Trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. That's a great place to post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @Pless. Here are the key tenets to my approach of trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. I think that certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And we'll certainly see that today as I have rolled over now to the September contract. So the contract that everyone has been trading for the last 3 months, the June contract, will cease to exist on Friday. And again, I've already rolled over to the June contract. So when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of those trades, and the hedgers build exposure with ES futures. And for the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index. QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index. And again, the NQ Futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of those trades, and the hedgers build exposure with NQ Futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading, and the first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day, as well as a directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about the setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions or comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for today, Monday, June 16th. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, and events for the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups from earlier today, to get an idea of what traders and market makers have been doing earlier today and how the market sets up for the afternoon session. Then I'll get to live market. And when I get to live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know. I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with economic data, news items, and events. And let's go to the Spotgamma dashboard home screen, and I'm going to take a look at the events calendar for the week. Pretty light, but some key events. So starting tomorrow, retail sales come out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Then Wednesday, the big day, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, housing starts, building permits. And of course, the big event for the week is the FOMC announcement at meeting, the announcement at 2 p.m., that will be in the middle of my webinar on Wednesday. I'll stop whatever I'm doing. We'll watch the S&P 500. And then the press conference begins at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time as my webinar wraps up. And then Thursday is market holiday. That's the Juneteenth holiday. And then Friday is the big options expiration. That is the June monthly options expiration, and the monthly options expirations at the quarters are usually very large. So what this chart is showing is market maker delta notional by expiration. So you can see this is the upcoming expiration this Friday. The orange bars are showing positive delta notional or call delta notional, and the blue bar is showing negative delta notional or put delta notional. And you can see this is a heavily call dominated options expiration, and the typical expectation after a call dominated options expiration is for an increase in volatility, that that positive gamma calls that have been subduing market price action will expire, opening up the market for some consolidation, more volatility, and a potential move lower. All right, so that is the call-dominated expiration coming up on Friday. We'll talk more about that on Wednesday. All right, so that is the upcoming events, news for the week. Again, FOMC on Wednesday, options expiration on Friday. All right, let's move on to positional analysis now. Let's start with the S&P 500. So this is the ES Futures and Bookmap. And note, I have already rolled over, as I said before, to the September contract, the U contract. And the ES to SPX relationship and the ES to SPY relationship have changed substantially from Friday due to the new contract, and that right now the ES to SPX offset is 57 points, and on Friday it was 3 points using the June contract. So this is typical. As rollover occurs, the options expiration occurs, the contract expiration occurs, the ES to SPX, the index to futures contract offset expands substantially. So let's take a look at some key levels. Right before the cash open, ES found support at the SPX 6000 absolute gamma strike using the new 57-point offset. So that 6,000 level for SPX, I'm showing that at ES 6057. And I do post those index relationships every day in Discord. All right, another key level today, the SPY 600 level. That's also the absolute gamma strike and the call wall. All right, I'm going to zoom in a bit. So we'll just focus on the regular trading session here. So here's the cash open. Brief bullish opening drive, some consolidation. And then I believe this next leg higher was driven by news. So I got an email from the Wall Street Journal. The timestamp was 10:06, indicating that Iran was interested in de-escalating. So they want to go back to the table for nuclear talks. All right, so that, I assume the email that I got from Wall Street Journal was several minutes late at best. So that is most likely the driver for that. If anybody knows any different, please let me know. But that looked like that was the driver for the next leg up. And note, SPX moved all the way up to ES moved all the way up to the SPX 6050 level. That was noted as resistance in the Spotgamma Founders note. and it did its job, acted as resistance. That's a SPY combo level just above that. So those levels acted as resistance. And then ES has been grinding lower. Looks like it broke out of this downtrend line a few minutes ago, and now maybe be heading back down toward that line. So we'll take a look at setups in just a few minutes. So those are the levels in play: 6,000 on the downside and 650 on the upside. Again, SPX levels, not ES levels. All right, let's take a look. Before I take a closer look at this chart, let's step back, take a look at a higher time frame. I'm going to go to the SPX, the underlying index. Focus on, so this is a chart and Thinkorswim. It's a one-day, one-year chart. I'm going to focus on the most recent price action. There's that 512 gap. China tariff news over the weekend, that weekend. SPX rallied up, came back down. May 23rd made a low, and then has continued to rally. And again, finding resistance at 60.50. All right, so let's take a look now at a closer time frame. Let's go to a 1 hour chart. I've zoomed in on this chart just a little bit. So there's that May 12th gap. Pullback. Starting to create an uptrend line. Then resistance right around 60.50. So Wednesday, SPX bumped up all above that level up to about 60.59, and again continues right now to find resistance right around the 60.50. We'll take a look at the gamma situation in just a few minutes to see what is potentially causing that resistance, the positive gamma there. All right, let's take a look at the levels on this chart. I'm going to start with the expected moves. These are based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Dashed purple lines showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. This is based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from again last Friday. Those levels remain in place for the entire week. And then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move, also based on the options market, again based on the closing price for SPX from yesterday. And that upper daily expected move for SPX is right in line with just below the 60.50 level. So that 60.50 and the upper daily expected move acting as resistance today. And I also post those levels in Discord every day, the evening before. All right, let's take a look at the Spotgamma levels on this chart. These are shown with the dark red lines. I'm going to point out the key daily levels. First of all, the put wall is at 5,900. That's a strike with the largest net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support. Next level up is the volatility trigger at 59.95, and that of Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market maker's position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And that's the key. In positive gamma, market makers are trading against price. They're selling rips and buying dips. And we'll take, and this is based on Spotgamma's older, what they call the naive model. Or again, we'll take a look at a more up-to-date view of gamma in just a couple of minutes based on Spotgamma's synthetic open interest model. And just above that is the absolute gamma strike at 6,000. That's the strike with the largest absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma-weighted open interest is concentrated. And then finally, the call wall is at 6,100. That's the strike with large net positive gamma that can be expected to act as resistance. And if SPX continues to move higher, that would be the next logical target, 6,100. Note those levels did not change from Friday, so all key daily levels remain unchanged from Friday. Now for SPY, the volatility trigger and the call wall both move lower, but they're unchanged for SPX. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1-minute chart. And let's go take a look at a 1-minute chart. Pretty choppy price action. And resistance is around this 650 level. And again, we'll see the positive gamma in that zone that seems to be acting as a resistance. All right, so here's today. This is Friday. Move down due to the news, Israel news. Then big gap up today. A little bit of consolidation. Then I think the news came out about Iran seeking de-escalation and a move up back to the 60-50 level. Then very nice steady ground, grinding down price action, very steady, consistent price action. All right, so that is SPX. Again, gap up, 60-50 resistance. All right, back to Bookmap. So I've already pointed out the key daily levels. We'll take a look at SPX. We'll take a look at setups in just a few minutes. All right, so let's take a look at NASDAQ. NASDAQ, similar chart. Bullish opening drive, consolidation. News comes out, move up to this NDX, combo 4 level, and around that level acting as resistance. All right, let's take a look at the underlying index charts. Let's start with QQQ. So there are no Spotgamma levels in play for QQQ today. And it looks like resistance is coming in right around 535. And let me zoom out just a little bit so we can see there is one level down below. 530. That is a large gamma 3 level. Price was trading down around that level before the cash opened. All right, so let's take a look at NDX now. NDX, the only level in play right now is that combo level that I mentioned before. Combo 4 level, 21,956. Around that level, acting as resistance. All right, back to Bookmap. So again, just like ES, I have NDX and QQQ levels shown on this chart. And I do post the relationships, NQ to QQQ, and also the NQ NDX offset every day. And right now, the NQ to NDX offset is 240 points. And on Friday, it was 15 using the June contract. All right, so we'll take a look at setups again in just a few minutes. All right, shifts in levels for NASDAQ. For NDX, the absolute gamma strike did shift lower. And for QQQ, the volatility trigger shifted lower, and the absolute gamma strike shifted lower. So again, we'll take a look at setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, let's wrap up our view of positional analysis by taking a look at gamma. And I'm going to skip over the older model, the gamma notional at the beginning of the day, just go on to trace. I think this is certainly what is relevant today. So this is what this chart is showing. This is available to Spotgamma subscribers. This is the Trace Gamma heat map. And this is for SPX only available for SPX. The blue shaded regions are showing positive gamma. Remember, positive gamma, market makers trade against price, so they would be selling rips and buying dips. And that appears to be what is happening today. So these bars over on the left, blue, are showing GEX bars, those gamma exposure, market makers gamma exposure, that is positive gamma. And you can also see the blue shaded region. So as price moved up this morning, found resistance right around 60.50. That's this largest GEX bar right here. 60.50 acting as resistance. And note on this chart, this is the JP Morgan call or strike. So JP Morgan, the JP Morgan fund that protects a stock portfolio with a risk reversal. They're long a put spread and short a call to help pay for the put spread. And their short call is 59.05. And that is pretty deep in the money at this point. That does expire at the end of the month. Not this Friday, but at the end of the month. And that, if price does move lower, that level should act as support. All right, so that's the situation now with gamma. Stability index a little bit higher than it has been in the last few weeks. It's been in the low single digits. Now it's moved up to 20% in this positive gamma node here, positive gamma region. And note the sharp negative gamma up above. And we can confirm that with an equity hub here, showing peak negative gamma all the way up at 63.75. All right, let's move on now. Let's take a look. We'll get to some setups. Then we'll get to the live market. All right, so this is the S&P 500. Hero signal. So this chart is the hero signal. It's available to Spotgamma subscribers. This is for the S&P 500 index components. So what this chart is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index, and again the index components. Those index components are SPX, SPY, ES Futures, and XSP. The white line is price for SPX, and the purple line is the hero signal. And a rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta options positions. They're buying calls and or selling puts. And they hedge their delta exposure by buying, market makers hedge their delta exposure by buying ES futures. And a falling hero signal indicates traders are buying puts and selling calls. Market makers, again, take the opposite side of those trades, and they hedge their delta exposure by selling ES futures. So you can see in the morning, hero signal rising but not sharply. Then right around 9:49, that's when the hero signal jumped. Again, leveled off, made a peak right after 10:20, started to move lower. So both a very good long setup this morning, then a short. So we can zoom in on that a little bit. And here when I've zoomed in, you can see gradual move higher in the hero signal. And then this is an institutional block order. Large block order. Traders, large institution, buying a large number of calls, selling puts. And that is what I call an institutional kickoff. And price, that's when price moves higher. That's most likely when the news came out. Then another block order. All right, let's shift to puts and calls so we can see this a little bit more clearly. And you can see at 9:49, this won't last long. Block order, buying calls, selling puts, another block order. Then this call peak pattern just after 10:20. Then a lower call peak pattern. Hero starts to move lower, and then price responds lower at that 60-50 large gamma resistance area. And that was also near the Spotgamma implied one-day move high. Now that is based on the opening price for SPX. All right, let's zoom out. So long setup, short setup, guided by options traders. Looks like another peak pattern just happened right after 1:30. Right now, traders are selling calls and buying puts in the index components, and price is moving lower as market makers sell futures to hedge their delta exposure. Let's take a look at the equity signal. And you can see in the morning, those large orders come in, starting right around 9:49 as the news breaks. Traders buying calls, and this is the equity signal again, showing options trades, market maker hedging activity for all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. So I think today the index signal has been more timely, provided better signals. All right, so let's go take a look at Bookmap now. Back to ES. Let's zoom in a bit. So there's that brief bullish opening drive. Looking at the volume dots show market buy minus sell. Magenta dots indicate more sellers than buyers. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. So you can see right at the cash open, the aggressive buyers start to come in. And also note the light blue line here, that's showing iceberg orders. Large traders use iceberg orders to hide their size. This is pretty unusual that large traders are moving in the direction of price, so they are buying this move higher. Normally they fade moves, so they normally sell strength and buy weakness. But in this case, they were buying strength. So that was another confirmation of a move higher. Options traders taking positive delta options positions, price moves higher. And also large traders buying with iceberg orders. Yellow line showing buy stop orders helping to fuel that move higher. And then the rising dark blue line, cumulative volume delta, also showing aggressive buyers. So here's where price breaks out of this consolidation. As the news breaks, pullback entry right at SPY 602, another pullback entry at 603, again at 603, and up to the 650 resistance positive gamma zone. And price starts to move lower at that point as that call peak pattern came in and traders started taking negative delta options positions. And then that gradual pullback continued. Nice pullback entries for shorts along this trend line. As price moves lower and traders continue to take negative delta options positions, especially in the index components. Now it looks like, remember we saw in the hero signal that traders were selling calls and buying puts, and prices broken sharply lower, this time finding resistance at a couple of ES levels. That's the 6100 level and also the ES upper daily expected move. Finding a resistance there. So I probably should have drawn this as a channel. And Bookmap does have a channel tool. All right, so that's the S&P 500. Any questions about that? And cumulative volume delta did start to move lower just right around 11 o'clock. And I don't think this information, iceberg stops and cumulative volume delta, or especially icebergs and stops. Remember, the June contract is still trading until Friday, so I think some of this order flow, stops, and icebergs will be split between the June and September contract. And as Friday approaches, more of the volume will switch over to the September contract here. All right, let's take a look at NASDAQ. Then there's been some quite an interesting action in stocks, so we'll take a look at stocks. So right now, it looks like ES may be finding support at VWAP. That's that light blue line. Let's move on to NASDAQ. Similar chart. Zoom in on this. Now in this case, large traders were fading this move with iceberg orders. More typical price action. Rising yellow line indicates buy stop orders were helping to fuel that move higher. Let's see what options traders are doing. So let's go back to Hero. And just like I'm going to go back to the total signal. And just like the S&P 500, there are two signals that we can take a look at. And the first is the NASDAQ index signal showing options trades, market maker hedging activity for the NDX and QQQ, the underlying indexes, index components for the NASDAQ. So you can see the sharp move higher, initiated right around 949, levels off, call peak pattern or peak pattern right around 1120. And then the options traders take the foot off the gas, but it does not look like as sharply as the ES traders, the S&P 500 traders did. All right, let's take a look at the other hero signal for the NASDAQ 100 that we can take a look at for the NASDAQ 100. And this is the MAG 7 signal showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the 7 stocks, magnificent 7 stocks: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla. And we'll take a look at some of those stocks in just a minute. All right, so again, you see that reversal kickoff right around 949. Traders start taking positive delta positions in the MAG 7 stocks. Mainly buying calls. All right, back to NASDAQ, back to NQ. So let's compare ES. So it looks like the pullback is a little bit deeper in ES than it is in NASDAQ. So it looked like ES had retraced maybe 50% of that move from this morning, whereas for NASDAQ, maybe only 25%. All right, let's take any questions about the indexes. All right, let's move on. Let's take a look at some stocks, and let's see if we can track down some of the stocks with that institutional kickoff right before 9:50. So one of them is Amazon. You can see there are a lot of aggressive buyers in Amazon today. That's shown by all the green volume dots, rising cumulative volume delta. We'll see what options traders are doing in Amazon today. Going to leave this to puts and calls. Take a look at Amazon. Notice in Amazon, the call buyers came in before the news, before 9:49. Then put sellers came in at 9:49. And it's mainly been call buyers driving price. The orange line showing calls, blue line showing puts. And a rising large line indicates traders are buying calls. When traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. And this is a very nice example of a bullish opening drive. Then a call peak pattern and call buyer exhaustion. And Amazon consolidating. So call buyers as well as aggressive buyers driving Amazon higher today. Next stock I want to take a look at is Meta. Meta, the call buyers came in a little bit late. Looks like that might have been timed more with the news that came in just before 9:50. Call buyers start moving higher. Drive Meta higher up above the 700 call wall, key gamma strike, then another call peak pattern. And this time they were, instead of just exhausted, not buying calls anymore like Amazon, they started selling calls. Price moved lower. Looks like call buyers came in again as price moved down below the 700 level, and now is found support there and is moving back up above 700 as traders buy calls. All right, let's take a look at Bookmap now. Go to Meta. Zoom out just a little bit. So Meta, there was news this morning that came out right around 9 a.m. That was good for a 15-point plus move higher. And that I believe was that Meta was starting to include ads in WhatsApp. So that was the news that came out this morning. Pretty deep pullback. Call buyers start to come in. Also, more aggressive buyers. You can see the rising cumulative volume delta. Sellers are exhausted. Buyers come in, move price back up, new high of the day. Then more consolidation as remember that call peak pattern. And then they start selling calls and have resumed buying calls. Meta found support just above this liquidity that came in at 696. Those were limit buy orders in the order book. Looks like absorption at that level. Those orders were not consumed. And as price moved higher, traders pulled their orders. And note the top here was right at 707. Those are limit sell orders shown by the heat map and Bookmap there. Heat map shows a history of limit orders in the order book. So right now, the heat map is showing limit sell orders at every round number here up above. 703, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so call buyers driving price. Call buyers and sellers driving price in Meta today. All right, next stock, Microsoft. Bullish day on Microsoft, at least on the option side. Cumulative volume delta negative for the day. We'll see what options traders are doing in Microsoft. All right, so there's another block order. Looks like this came in a little bit before 9:59. Let's see when that came in. So that was a little bit earlier, 9:55. So large institutional order, some large institution buying calls. That's pretty typical of Microsoft. There are a lot of large block orders, a lot of these vertical lines in Microsoft. So that helped to kick off this second leg of the move higher. And then the key level here is the 480 call wall. Price did move up above that level, but has finally found resistance at that level. And call buying primarily driven by two large block orders. So right now, both the call line and put line are flat. So that fuel that had driven Microsoft higher earlier is no longer there, and Microsoft moving lower. Remember again, 480 call wall, and Microsoft unable to get above that level. And note, net for the day, cumulative volume delta is negative. So earlier today, it was primarily, there were some aggressive buyers coming in, but they're gone now. So aggressive sellers coming in, as well as call sellers and put buyers driving Microsoft lower. All right, next stock, Palantir. Very brief bullish opening drive. Let's see what options traders are doing. Go to Palantir. Palantir just keeps going higher and higher. Aggressive call buyers came in for about the first half hour. Call peak pattern at 10 o'clock. And this is more just a call exhaustion, call buyer exhaustion. And there were some put sellers as well. So very fast, bullish opening drive, and then call buyer exhaustion, and price now consolidating. Back to Bookmap. So it looks like Palantir found resistance right below the 145, the high liquidity. Again, those are limit sell orders in the order book, and that's absorption at that level. Price did not quite reach that level. Those orders were consumed, and call buyers took the foot off the gas, and now Palantir is consolidating, chopping up and down around VWAP. This is light blue line right here. All right, next stock I want to take a look at. And let's take a look at something else first. I'm going to go to a tool that I have talked about in the past. I continue to use it. It's called Edge to Trade, and it's a good way to find stocks to trade. Earlier today, a lot of nuclear stocks. These are smaller stocks, pretty volatile, good to trade. But a lot of nuclear stocks were moving higher, like, nano-nuclear energy. Here you can see the stock, the chart. And this is updated constantly. So again, earlier today, nuclear stocks moving higher. That's nano-nuclear energy, SMR, Oklo. Looks like they have slowed down a bit now. So some other stocks, this is for large cap tech stocks, or large cap stocks. Here's AMD, up about 9.5% today. AMD got an upgrade this morning, and we'll take a look at the hero chart. I don't have that on Bookmap. AMD, it's just a beautiful hero chart, but and look at this. Look at this move higher, just very steady, mechanical. Price moving higher, AMD. So again, we'll take a look at AMD in just a moment to see what options traders are doing. All right, so let's go back to Hero. Let's take a look at one of the nuclear stocks. Nano Nuclear Energy, NNE. Call buyers end of the morning. Price breaks above the 35 call wall, and then right around 10:50, 11, call buyers take the foot off the gas, and NNE consolidating. So bullish opening drive to call exhaustion, call buyer exhaustion, and the stock is consolidating. Let's take a look at Bookmap. I do have this in Bookmap. So here in NNE, the bullish opening drive went on for about an hour, so giving you plenty of chance to get in before the call buyers were exhausted. So not as fast and furious as Palantir. Again, nice stock to trade on the long side today. And you can see as price moves up, more aggressive sellers start to come in. You can see more magenta volume dots as price has started to move lower, also shown by the falling cumulative volume delta there. So NNE leading the nuclear stocks higher today. And let's go back and take a look at, let's go back to Hero, and let's take a look at a couple of other stocks. Then there's one other stock I want to take a look at that is not in Hero. All right, so here's some of the other nuclear stocks. SMR, pretty choppy Hero signal, but SMR did find resistance at the 45 call wall. Sharp move higher, just about 15 minutes. Price moves price moves lower after finding a resistance at the call wall. And another one was Oklo. That was kind of a leader earlier this morning, but it was a very fast, furious opening drive. And price started to move lower, and then the call sellers came in just a few minutes later, a couple of minutes later. All right, one other stock. Let's take a look at AMD. Remember that very steady uptrend, and that was caused by what appears to be algorithmic call buying. Up past the 120 key gamma strike, 125 call wall. That lasted for about 90 minutes or so, giving you plenty of opportunity to get long. And then finally ending in call buyer exhaustion and put seller exhaustion. And now AMD is consolidating right around 126. And I believe the catalyst for that, again, as far as I saw, was just an upgrade this morning. All right, one other stock I want to take a look at, and let's go back to the indexes. One other stock, not available on Hero. This is a recent IPO, and it has been a big mover. Looks like decent bid-ask spread on a on a recent IPO. That is Circle, and that is a stable coin. So it's in the crypto space. And let's take a look at Circle. And it's, again, been a big mover. Operates as a platform, network, and market infrastructure for stablecoin and blockchain applications. So a recent IPO, Circle, been a great mover. Great stock to trade or own. All right. Does anyone have any stocks they want me to take a look at? All right, let's check. Let's go back to the indexes now. And so we're looking at the S&P 500 index Hero signal. So remember the last time we looked at this, Hero was dropping pretty sharply. It looks like now the signal has leveled off. And SPX is now consolidating. Let's take a look at the S&P 500 equity signal, and that's pretty flat. We can zoom in a little bit. So both the index components, options trades in the index components, as well as the equities are driving the S&P 500. Let's go to take a look at Bookmap, see what traders are doing with ES. So back to ES. All right, so the move down continues. Then starting right around 1:30, just as my webinar began, the excursion out of this downward channel began. Resistance at ES 6100 and the ES upper daily expected move. Now back down to VWAP. Let's check NASDAQ. Looks like NASDAQ has been finding support right around QQQ 534. All right, anybody have any questions, comments? Any stocks you want me to take a look at? All right, let's go back to Hero. Zoom in on this. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up another tab here so I can stay zoomed in. So let's go to the S&P 500 equities here. Zoom in on this. So it looks like the equity signal may be moving slightly lower. And IDN 006 wants to check the NQ Hero. All right, for NQ, there is no NQ Hero signal. For NQ, we do check the NASDAQ signal. So let me open up another. So we're looking at the Hero signal for the underlying index components. So this is let's go over to NASDAQ. So there are two signals that we can take a look at for NASDAQ. So if you trade NQ, this is what you want to take a look at. And this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for NDX and QQQ. So you take a look at either this, the NASDAQ index signal, or the stocks, the Magnificent Seven stocks that make up a large component of the S&P 500 index. So let's go back to we'll take a look at the NASDAQ signal. Open up full screen. Zoom in on this. So does that make sense? IDN 006. That we're looking at options trades in the underlying index rather than NQ. So when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. So that's why we're looking at this for the NQ. All right, great. So glad that makes sense. All right, so it looks like NASDAQ a bit stronger than ES here. So let's check all these hero signals. Back to equities, chopping up and down. And the same for the S&P 500 index, also chopping up and down. Let's go back to Bookmap. So right now it looks like ES found support at VWAP again. Now normally when I'm trading, I'm looking at 3 screens. I have Hero on one screen over to my left, Bookmap in my middle screen, and then Trading Platform on my right screen. Of course, I'm presenting, I can only show one screen at a time. Let's go back, let's check Trace. So now it looks like, and let me zoom in just a little bit. So note the positive gamma up above, so I expect if price does move up to find some resistance again at that level. But if SPX starts to move lower down into this negative gamma down below, it could move pretty quickly down through that level. Let's check. And note stability index has dropped now down to 9%. As SPX has dropped down toward this negative gamma just below. Let's check Charm, see if we can find a potential pinning zone. And what we're looking for here is, and this is Charm, this is showing buying support, selling pressure due to time decay. And this would be for options that expire today. And that's one thing I meant to look at in Hero. A large component of Hero is options that trade today. So what this is showing is a potential pinning target at the end of the day. That's right around 60.20 or just above. Let's see. So this is showing actually at 60.30. So that's right around this Gex bar here, the large Gex bar at 60.25. So 60.20. So it's about 60.25. Whoops, I'm meant to be down here, 60.20. Blue buying support below. Red selling pressure above due to time decay. So potential pinning target, 620, 625 maybe. If price does move lower, if traders start taking more negative delta options positions. All right, so back to Hero. Equities now moving higher. Index slightly higher. Back to Bookmap. So chopping now on a pretty narrow zone. Large traders continue to buy with iceberg orders, shown by the rising light blue line. Let's check NASDAQ. Also consolidating, again finding support at the QQQ 534 level. All right, back to Hero. Not much movement in the index signal. Equity signal is moving higher. Could potentially lead to a move higher. And let's check NASDAQ. Also moving higher. Go back to Trace. So again, if price remains around this level, potential pinning target. Probably 60.25. Right in line with this positive gamma, the blue Gex bar there. All right, last call for questions, comments. All right, everyone, remember Friday, FOMC, 2 p.m. That will be in the middle of my session, so I'll spend the first half hour most likely with preparation, talking about positional analysis, and then review some setups, price action from earlier today. Then I'll stop whatever I'm doing at 2 p.m. and we'll watch the live market. All right, I hope to see everyone there. Have a great afternoon. I will see you Wednesday. Thanks for watching. See you Wednesday. Bye.